Welcome back to So You Really Want to Learn Latin, and today, as promised, we are going to be looking at reflexive pronouns. A reflexive pronoun refers back to the subject of the verb, and we use them when we want the subject to be doing something to themselves. Okay, I call myself Nicholas. Okay, you call yourself Lucy. Okay, they call themselves the Romans. In English you hear the word self, and it's where the action of the verb is being done back. It's kind of bouncing back onto the subject. Now the reflexive pronouns of the first and second person, so that's I call myself, you call yourself, are just the oblique cases of the personal pronoun. By oblique, remember, we mean everything other than nominative and vocative. So, I call myself, if you want the word I, ego, and woko I call, but if I call myself, I go ego me woko, so I call myself, boof. Okay, and you call yourself tu te wokas. But the reflexive pronoun of the third person, we're going to need one, because if you remember, there isn't really an equivalent third person pronoun for he or she or it. We have to make do with is, er, id, or sometimes ele, ala, alud. Okay, so we need a reflexive pronoun for the third person, and it is say. Okay, it doesn't have a nominative and vocative, because reflexive pronouns don't. So it is just say, sui, sibi, say. Okay, so those are the accusative, genitive, dative, and ablative cases. Say, sui, sibi, say. Okay, and that covers singular and plural, and obviously all genders. So if you want to say the king killed himself, we're going to go rex, say, interfecit. Okay. Rex is the subject, interfecit is the verb, and say is the direct object, but where that direct object is identical to the subject, okay, so the subject is doing something back to himself, we need the reflexive pronoun. And if it were plural, you might have milites se interfecerunt. The soldiers killed themselves. Okay, and as I said, for the first and second person, you just use the personal pronouns that you already know. So if you want to say, I wounded myself, you might see me vulneravi. It looks a little bit as if you're saying, I wounded me, which kind of is what it means. But you wouldn't say I wounded me, you'd say I wounded myself. Okay. And sometimes, if you want to really stress that I killed myself, you can intensify the reflexive pronoun by adding a form of ipse, meaning self. So, me ipsum vulneravi means I wounded myself. You know, woof, myself. I wounded myself. What a weird thing to do. Okay? Now you can use these reflexive pronouns in the genitive, dative and ablative. Genitive is a bit rare. Dative is a very obvious example. He is singing to himself, sibi cantat. He is singing sibi to himself. So the subject he is singing, so he, the subject, is singing is the verb. Who is he singing to? He's singing to himself. So we need sibi. Okay. Dative of the reflexive pronoun. Okay, so that's reflexive pronouns. By the way, if you know any French, it's just exactly the same idea as in French. Je m'appelle, for example, I call myself. Je me lève, I get up, I raise myself. Tu t'appelles, you call yourself. So reflexive pronouns are very common in modern languages. In French, I think you even refer to reflexive verbs. They are verbs that are always used with a reflexive pronoun. And actually the reflexive pronouns in, for example, French, look frighteningly similar to the Latin ones because, of course, they came from Latin. So il s'appelle, that's is a truncated form of say, isn't it? It would have been say, but you've got an apostrophe because you're hitting the A of appel. Il se lève, he gets himself up. You know, you've got say, it's a Latin word. So, another, if we needed another reason why Latin is the most amazing thing, there is another reason. Okay, now, I did warn you that I hadn't quite finished with indirect statements. We've done a lot on indirect statements recently, but this is probably the last thing. It's just that where the subject of an indirect statement is the same as the subject of the main verb in that sentence, we're going to need a reflexive pronoun. So, just to give you an example of that, he said that he would come to Rome. Okay, he said that he would come to Rome. Now, the main verb is he said, but in the indirect statement, you've got that he would come. And that he is the same he as in he said. Okay, so now, as you know, we're going to use an accusative and infinitive, but you're going to need the accusative of the pronoun he, because he said that he, and that he is the same as the person who's doing the speaking. So you're going to need a reflexive pronoun. It's as if the Latin is sort of translating, he said himself to be about to come. Okay, so he said that he would come to Rome would be dixit, for he said, and then that he say to be about to come, future infinitive active of venio, venturum esse, and then to Rome would be Romam, with no preposition because it's a town, small island, domus and rus. Okay, so dixit se Romam venturum esse would be he said that he would come to Rome. If you had something like he said that he was working, that would be dixit se laborare. He said himself to work. Dixit se laborare. He said that he was working. Okay. Or he says that he is working. Dicit se laborare. Okay. Or if we want to use a perfect infinitive, he said that he had conquered the Gauls. Okay. Dixit se Gallos superavisse. Okay. He said himself to have overcome the Gauls. Okay. So reflexive pronouns, really, really useful little fellas, and indeed in this sort of situation, essential little fellas. You need them. Okay, and then just before we go, I'll leave it at that. That's, you know, it's another thing you've had to learn, reflexive pronouns. So you know, we don't want to go rushing on too fast. But just before we leave this, we haven't yet talked about negative indirect statements. And there is a absolutely razor-sharp rule in Latin that you must not use dico followed by known. Okay? So if you want to say he said that he had not overcome the Gauls, it sounds as if you're going to go dixit and then blah-de-blah-de-blah, and the word known is going to come in before the overcome the Gauls bit. But no, you do not do that. Okay? So if you want to say that he said that something wasn't the case, you don't use dico at all, you use nego, which is the Latin for I deny. Okay? So he said that he would not come will be negavit, he denied, se venturum esse. He denied that he would come. Okay? So he said that the enemy were not fighting. Negavit hostes pugnare. Okay? So nego, it's a first conjugation verb like amo, nego, negari, negavi, negatum. It means I deny, but it is also the Latin for I say that not. Okay? So it's not really I deny that they are doing it, you know, in a kind of very forceful way. It is simply I say that they're not. I say that it's not the case. Okay, so that now allows you to translate wonderful little sentences. I'll just give you two. We are in Book 3, Chapter 4, on page 41. And I'll just give you two. We have, for example, okay, so we've got Agricola quidam, clamabat se aurum in agro invenisse. Okay, Agricola quidam, a certain farmer. That's our nominative case, that's the subject. Agricola quidam, a certain farmer, clamabat, shouted, se aurum in agro invenisse. So a certain farmer shouted that he, there's our reflexive pronoun, invenisse, had found, so that's the perfect infinitive active, to have found. A certain farmer shouted that he had found aurum, gold, in agro, in the field. Okay? Okay. Then we've got another one actually using nescio, which means I do not know. Remember, indirect statements are introduced by verbs of saying or knowing or perceiving or hearing or thinking. Well, they can also be introduced by verbs of not knowing, so nescio. So here we've got Romani nesciebant Hannibalem trans montes venturum esse. Okay, the Romans did not know, and then we're going to hear the English word that. The Romans did not know Hannibalem, that Hannibal, venturum esse, would come, that's the future active. The Romans did not know that Hannibal would come trans montes, across the mountains. Okay, and then finally we've got a negative one here. Puer negavit se mensam fregisse. Puer negavit, the boy denied, se that he, fregisse, had broken from frango, frangeri, fregi, fractum. The boy denied that he had broken mensam, the table. Okay, right. So reflexive pronouns, there they are. Negative indirect statements, don't forget to use nego and not, deco followed by known. And, you know, we're set up to deal with all sorts of complicated Latin passages using the indirect statement, even when it refers to the subject of the main verb, using a reflexive pronoun. Well, what more could you ask? Right, that's enough now. See you back on this channel very soon for more Latin, and until then, keep up the good work.